And welcome to the Peach Baskets podcast here, getting you caught up on the weekly happenings in the Peach Belt Conference. I'm Mike Licio Jr. This is my son, Mike Licio the third. Hope you all had a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving as a whole, Michael, your thoughts?
It was fun. Hanging out with family, friends, everyone, just having a good time, eating some very good food. Tell you what, your pulled ham was a hit.
My pulled ham, that was the surprise of Thanksgiving. So, um, check it out on the internet if you get a chance to make a pulled ham. Basically, you take a cooked ham, a whole ham like you buy at the grocery store, you smoke it like a pulled pork. So it worked out to be a good deal. So yeah, it was a good day. You fell
Yeah,
asleep on the couch about 7 o'clock. I think the
I
turkey
did.
had caught up to you, but
Oh
you
yeah.
know, long weekend begins, and really, we're starting to get into the meat of the basketball season. At the Division 1 level, a lot of invitational tournaments still going on, whereas the Division 2 level, we're mostly into the non-conference schedule. The Peach Belt actually next weekend will have a weekend of conference play before January. I'm still looking into how that happened, because generally at both levels, Division 1 and Division 2, conference play doesn't begin until after the first of the year, but they'll begin next week, and we'll get you prepared for that slate. We'll have some guests next week and the week after that we're looking really forward to do. But
Mhm.
let's get right into it. Let's pull up the standings here and show everybody where we are in the world. So, as you can see, North Georgia continues to roll 7-1 on the season. Buford right behind them, Columbus State and Aiken all with one loss. Flagler 4-2. They had a tough loss though on Tuesday night. We'll get to. And Clayton State 4-3. You might look at 4-3 and say, okay, that's not bad, but considering where Clayton was this time last year, pretty good start for them. And Georgia Southwestern, Lander, and Georgia College and Augusta. Augusta gets off the schneid, ends that 5-game losing streak with a win this week. But overall, it was a good week for the conference, and we'll get into a slate day. All 10 teams played on Tuesday. There was a couple games before that. But let's start where I always like to start and go with the player of the week, and that was Jalen McCoy from USC Aiken. He was on my short list of people who I thought would be contending for player of the year, and I think right now this was well deserved, and I think there's some argument to be made for another player, but we'll get to that later. Your thoughts on Jalen McCoy's week?
Oh, Jalen McCoy is one of the best scorers, not only in the Peach Belt, but also he's one of the best scorers in the country. He's 12th in the country in points per game, 40th in the country in field goal percentage. You don't find many scorers like that.
Yeah, he's been remarkably consistent for USC Aiken. He's kind of carried them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Um, we're going to get into this because I want to have this discussion. Obviously, last week's winner was Tim Hall from Georgia Southwestern. I think you could make the argument that Tim Hall deserved it for another week, but that no way is a knock to Jalen McCoy. Just that there's a lot of players playing some good basketball in the Peach Belt Conference.
Absolutely. We'll get to the Tim Hall game in a minute, but I agree with you. He was very much deserving. But Jalen McCoy also very deserving. Had a great game against. They played Winston-Salem State. Oh no, that was Lander.
They played Winston-Salem State earlier,
Earlier in the year. Correct.
but they played Tuskegee. Georgia Southwestern did on
Yes.
Tuesday. So yeah, it was a good week for Jalen. Obviously neither one of those guys are going away. We'll be talking about them for the bulk of the season. But congratulations to Jalen McCoy, who is the Peach Belt Player of the Week.
Yes, sir.
So we got a full slate on Tuesday. So I don't know that every week's going to be like this, but the way it's set up the last couple of weeks is we've had a weekday where everybody plays, and I think it will be more like this in conference season. We'll probably focus more in on a game by game basis just because of the way the schedule works in conference, where you play one weekday game and one weekend game. But it was a good week for some teams in the conference, and some teams not so much. But we'll start with the first game on our list here. Elizabeth City State beating Clayton State. Clayton State coming off a win against Morehouse to get to 4-2, where they shot 10 for 15 from the 3-point line. That is the best shooting percentage any team in the conference has had this season. But
they were lacing it in that game.
they certainly were. But they kind of regressed to the norm in that department against Clayton State. They were 6 for 21 for three. They are currently 271st in the nation in 3-point shooting out of 287 teams. But it was a solid night. Jamal Gleiss had a good game. Aaron Pitts had 16, and JoJo Bell, who is the star of the show, he had 18 points despite being in foul trouble.
Yeah, he did. He did end up fouling out of that game, which is very unfortunate for Clayton State. He was really driving their offense. He had 18, 4 rebounds. Had a steal in this game, but didn't have an assist. Which, if you're gonna they really need to get those assist numbers up because they only had 10 the entire game, which that could be a major problem for them.
But it also comes when you have a team that's struggling to shoot the ball, and right now Clayton State is near the bottom in the conference in field goal shooting. They're near the bottom in the conference near the bottom in the nation in field goal shooting, but they make up for it. How do they have a winning record right now? Well, they play defense. They're second in the conference in scoring defense, and they make their free throws. So if you're not making buckets from the field, you got to knock down your free throws. And they're second in the conference in free throw percentage and second in scoring defense. So those are things that are going to keep you in games, even when the shots aren't falling down.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 10 blocks, 9 steals on the night. That's really good. Aaron Pitts himself had 4 steals. So, I mean, that really is what kept them in the games, as you said.
And then the 10 blocks, they are the first team in the conference to have 10 blocks in a game this season. Mm-hmm. Moving on to the next game, Tuskegee versus Georgia Southwestern. That one went into overtime. Lars Nielsen led the Canes with 22, but Tim Hall Jr., man.
This is why he should have been a front runner for Conference Player of the Week. 19 points, 20 rebounds.
That is the most in the conference this season. The previous high was his 18 against Barton a couple weeks ago. And Tim Hall continues to be who makes the Canes go. Where Tuskegee was able to make some hay and win this game was because, well, it was an overtime game, but they did just enough to stop Josiah Shackelford, who only had 9 points in 24 minutes, and Justin Mondin had a tough night for them. But they held Tuskegee to 37% 3-point shooting. But getting back to Tim Hall, not only one of the best players in the Peach Belt, but one of the best front court players in the country right now. He leads the conference in rebounding. He's first in the nation in total rebounds and third in rebounding average. He's tied with Flagler's Jalen Jordan for the second most double-doubles in the country. He's second in field goal percentage. He's fourth in blocks per game. Tim Hall is the guy who makes this team go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like with the absence of Jalen Jordan, who, as you mentioned, from Flagler, former Georgia Southwestern Cane, he's really, truly stepped up for them. He went 5 for 8 from the free throw line, which as a center is very impressive.
Yeah, I would say so. And we'll talk about Jalen Jordan in a little bit for Flagler, but I was thinking about this as we're getting ready for the show. Imagine if they had both those guys in the front court. We're going to talk about Jalen Jordan's numbers, but I think early on in the league this year, the Peach Belt has established itself as an inside-out league. So they're going to teams that work from the inside out and get their points in the paint and get their points inside the 2-point arc, but it's inside the 3-point arc. But we're going to see this Georgia Southwestern team. They shoot the ball well. They're third in the conference in field goal shooting. They're tops in the conference in rebounding. They're in the top 30 in the NCAA in rebounding. And those are things that even when you're having a night where you're not shooting the ball well, the ability to get rebounds and get the ball back is going to serve you well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, offensive rebounds create extra possessions, which creates extra points, which leads you to wins. I mean, back to Tim Hall. He alone had 9 offensive boards. That in itself is insane.
There are some games where a team doesn't get 9 offensive boards, but like I said, Tim Hall, I don't know that he was on my list of players that I thought would contend for conference player of the year, but he's putting up all American numbers right now for
Oh yeah.
the Canes. Now moving on, this is a game I was kind of had my eye on in the office on Wednesday or Tuesday rather, was when North Georgia and Francis Marion. We've seen Francis Marion. We saw them against Flagler. I called the game with Francis Marion against USC Buford earlier in the year, and this was a game where North Georgia had a 17-0 free throw advantage at the end of the first half, and that sounds like okay, that's on the road, so that tells you something. And you think, oh well, the refs may have been one-sided, but then you look deeper into the numbers, and this is something that Francis Marion has struggled with this year. They don't get to the free throw line, and they give up a lot of fouls, and their opponents are averaging about 20 free throw attempts a game, and North Georgia was no different in this one, but AJ White, 31
Oh
points.
my
There
gosh.
haven't been a lot of 30-point games in the Peach Belt this year.
I don't even think I can recall one this year.
Kenny Gaines had 35 for
Kenny
Buford.
Gaines,
There's been a couple, but
correct.
Kenny Gaines has the season high for Buford, and that was a game I called as well. And but 31 points for AJ White, who's 5th in the conference in scoring. He's the leading free throw shooter. He's in the top 50 in free throw shooting, shooting 91%, 4th in assists. Caden Charles continues to impress. He had 17 and 9 in that game. He's in the top 10 in scoring. He's 2nd in steals per game, and he's also a great rebounder. So Caden Charles is getting it done. Zach Hawkinson had a double-double. This is a North Georgia team that is ranked in the top 15. They're 12th in the nation for a reason. I
Oh
see you
yeah,
representing, yes.
yes, sir. Yeah, this is a really good scoring team, really good rebounding team. Dish the ball effectively. Don't have many turnovers, and they keep a pretty clean game. And back to what you were saying about Francis Marion, they just don't draw fouls.
Yeah,
I
they
noticed it.
struggle. They
I
struggle to
noticed it
get to
in
the
the
line.
Buford game, in the Emory and Henry game. They just don't get to the line very well.
And they're a team, and that's the thing about Francis Marion. They have a lot of bigs, and usually a team with a lot of bigs gets to the line, but they've struggled with that this year. UNG gets it done on the defensive end. They're 1st in scoring defense. They're the 2nd best three-point or field goal shooting team. They lead the conference in three-point shooting. In fact, they're 16th in the nation in the three ball. And when you combine that with the fact that they're 1st in field goal defense and 3rd in three-point defense, that's the recipe for winning a lot of games, which is why they're 7-1 this year. And then we always talk about it, making free throws. They make their free throws. They're 3rd in the conference in free throw percentage as well.
Mm-hmm. Free throws win championships.
You never know. You never know how a game's going to go, but if you make your free throws, you're going to be in more games than not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's talk about the Lander Bearcats. The Lander Bearcats had a game against Winston-Salem State. I think I said this last week, but the alma mater of Stephen A. Smith and New York Knicks great Earl the Pearl Monroe. And Lander gets the win. Noah Dunn, 21 points in the game. Dominic Stanford, 18. They shot 56% from the field in the first half, in the second half of that game. And that's how you close out games. When you get shots falling like at a 56% pace, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's where the Bearcats have shown this year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They were hot all night, and they just overcame Winston-Salem State.
They make threes, too. They lead the conference in three-pointers per game. And so they're able to make runs with the three ball this year, and that was a good win from them. Like I said, they have improved now, and they have another win on their record. They are now. Oh, I had it here. They're now back to 3-3 on the season, so they had a slow start. And of course, Lander was picked to win the conference, but I think this is a team that's starting to find themselves.
Yeah, they're starting to gel very well. Obviously, this is a younger team who lost a lot of guys, but they're having guys step up in roles and just playing good basketball right now.
So now we go to the next game on our list, and that would be the Edward Waters Flagler game. So Edward Waters had 2 Peach Belt teams this week. They traveled up to Beaufort earlier in the week, and Ronnie Ball was able to take down Edward Waters. So Beaufort got the win, and then they hosted Flagler in Jacksonville on Tuesday night, and this was a tough game for the Saints.
Yeah, they just struggled shooting the ball. Jack Spock Knight went 2 for 11. Max Hardlicker went 0 for 6. Trevor Smalls went 0 for 8. But Josiah Shackelford really stepped up for them. Went 7 for 12 with 21 points and 7 rebounds. Just an all-around great night for him.
There's a heated competition to be the best Josiah Shackelford in the Peach Belt Conference, and we did not stutter. There are 2 Josiah. Well, if we can say, I just might have stuttered. 2 Josiah Shacklefords in the Peach Belt Conference, one for Flagler, one for Georgia Southwestern, and they're both equally talented players. Jack Spocknight had a tough night, and I think that was the key for the Saints. Jack Spocknight came in top 10 in the country in three-point shooting, went 2 for 11 in that game. Jalen Jordan had a quiet night, 11 points and 5 rebounds, and he's in the top 10 in the conference in scoring. He currently is 11th in the nation, averaging 11 rebounds a game. That's 11th in the nation. He's 14th in total rebounds. He's first in field goal percentage, 20th in field goal percentage in the nation, and he's tied with Tim Hall for double-doubles. So when you hold Jalen Jordan to 11 and 5, it really takes away that dimension for the Saints. And when you couple that with shots not falling, it can be a recipe for disaster, especially for a team like Flagler that leans so heavy on that 3 ball.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They just got shelled from 3. Josiah Shackelford, only Saint with more than 3 or with 3 threes at least made. And this is a good Saints team. They'll come back from this, but I think they can use this as a learning experience to just get better.
And it's a long season. There's going to be games like this. But I think it really, for Flagler, it really simply comes down to the 3-point shot. If the threes are falling, they're going to be successful. If they're not, and not to say they're a one-dimensional team, but if you look at the fact that they're one of the best 3-point defending teams in the country, and you couple that with the fact that they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country, it really comes down to who's shooting the 3 ball better in the game, and that's usually going to bode well for Flagler when those shots are falling. Like I said, Jack Spocknight, you said, won 2 for 11. He's still in the top 50 in the nation in 3-point percentage. He's still way ahead. He's about 8% ahead of Zadair Green for the lead in 3-point shooting percentage in the Peach Belt Conference. So it's just a setback for the Saints. There's going to be games like this. I will say this because, obviously we're pretty tight with Flagler basketball. But I will say these are the kind of games you'd like to have that might come up on the resume when you get to the end of the season. There was a couple losses like that for Flagler last year. One of those being against North Georgia, where they blew a second half lead. And, these are the kind of games that you have to win early in the year, because if you want to keep playing basketball into the tournament, you're going to have to get it done. Let's move on to an upset in the Peach Belt Conference, and that would be Fayetteville State, a very good Fayetteville State team, but a USC Aiken team that was on the rise. They were up to 11th in the nation, falling to Fayetteville State. Despite 29 points from Jalen McCoy, he had 7 boards. His 14 field goals, the most by any player in the Peach Belt Conference this season. And Jalen McCoy, we talked about him being the star. He's first in the conference in scoring. He's 12th in the nation. He's 5th in the conference in field goal percentage. Jalen McCoy puts this team on his back time and time again. And in this case, Fayetteville State was just a little better on Tuesday night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jalen McCoy showed why he did deserve Conference Player of the Week this week. But Fayetteville State They just shot the ball lights out. They went from the free throw line. They went 23 for 28. And Caleb Simons had 34 points and 15 rebounds, which that's pretty hard to stop if you're USC Aiken.
That's hard to do in a college game. 34 and 15 is hard to do, but it's a nice segue to the only flaw on this Aiken team I see, because they're a great offensive team. They're one of the top 10 shooting teams in the nation. They're in the top of the conference in three-point shooting and field goal defense. So they play defense. They rebound the basketball. They do a great job on the offensive glass. They're one of the best in the country on the offensive glass. But their bugaboo is they are a terrible free throw shooting team, 63%. And I might sound like it's a little harsh, but they're currently in the bottom 30 in the nation in free throw percentages. So there's 287 teams that play Division II basketball, and only about 25 shoot worse than, 25 shoot worse than USC Aiken at the free throw line. That's something they're going to have to get better, because this is the Aiken team that has the ability to make a run in regionals, but free throws we talked about it earlier, free throws decide games, especially when you get into the NCAA regionals and you get into the Peach Belt tournament and you get into late in the season. You've got to be able to make those shots.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said earlier, free throws win championships.
That is for sure. So moving on through the conference, we've got another matchup here. Augusta, Dip Metris' team is going to figure it out. I've been saying it all along. They were 0-5. It was their worst start in 40 years. My favorite professor, Dr. Coyle, who teaches comp at JU, she played basketball at Augusta, and she was a student there the last time they started 0-5. But this is an Augusta team that is going to figure it out. And when you have guys like Max Madison and John St. Germain, who's one of the top players in assists in the Peach Belt Conference, and they even won despite a quiet night from Dimitri Gardner, who's one of the best players in the conference. They just shot the ball really well, and this is an Augusta team that needed to figure it out, and I think they took the first step on Tuesday.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They shot 53% from the field, 47% from three, and made their free throws 80%, 16 for 20. And they had 42 points in the paint. And they were just dominating the low post that night.
That's when Augusta was at their best, was when they had big Tyshawn Crawford dominating the paint. Although he developed that little baby mid-range jumper, which first time I saw it,
was unguardable. It was unguardable.
That's the last thing you want is a guy who's 7'1". At this level, you have to go against a guy who's 7'1", but also can pop out and shoot that mid-range.
Oh, yeah.
And he eventually developed a little bit of a right hand, but that was the key to Tyshawn Crawford. If you could get him to go right, you might have a chance. And that wasn't a very good chance, but you had a chance. And one thing they did in this game that they have struggled with this year is they kept control of the basketball. They averaged 17 turnovers a game, which is just problematic. And I think this is a team that's coming together. There's a lot of turnover from last year, a lot of changes, a lot of people graduating, and that's just part of the game. And you're going to see that sometimes. And so you're going to see turnovers too, because these are teams that are trying to figure out, you're not used to playing with these guys. So normally you think, okay, well, he's going to be there. Well, maybe he's not, because he doesn't know that he's supposed to be there, because he doesn't know the offense, or he doesn't know tendencies of players. So there's a lot of learning that goes with that. So that's where you're going to see those kind of turnovers. Let's move on to the Bobcats. The Bobcats with a big win over Fort Valley State, led by Zaire Green. We talked about him earlier being one of the top players in the conference in three-point shooting. He's also fourth in the conference in scoring. And when he has a big night, good things can happen for Georgia College, especially when they get other players going like Aiden Cudlis and Tony Carpio. They both had a great game. And the one thing with Georgia College, they have struggled offensively too. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the country. They're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. But they play defense. They're third in the conference in scoring defense, just a tenth of a point behind Clayton State for out of second, and they rebound the ball. And so if you can make the other team shoot poorly as well, and they struggle to score baskets, and you're effective at rebounding, you can overcome some of these things. I think these are things that have to get better as the season goes on. But it was a very good win for Georgia College and a great win for Coach Aquino and his squad.
Absolutely. I mean, they do stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. They lock down. They force bad passes. They just do it all defensively. And
defense travels.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. I mean, Tony Capario had
Carpio.
10 and 8. Carpio, sorry.
You got to get the Italian name right.
I know. I should have gotten the one Italian name right. But Tony Carpio, 10 and 8 on 5-11 shooting. Kind of a quiet, unsung hero for them. He was making defensive stops all night.
You know what? I'm going to jump back a little bit because I did want to talk about something. So the Lander Bearcats, they kind of went national this past week. And I'm just going to pull up here so you can see where to find it. I'm not going to play the video. But John Boy Media here with a breakdown of Lander's win against Catawba, where Catawba, the alma mater of Flagler softball coach Catherine Grant, I'm shouting out Flagler softball tonight, of course. But they had this crazy comeback, and it fell just short in John Boy Media. So if you go check that out, John Boy Media has been in my orbit this week. They actually posted one of my high school football videos, and I'm not going to talk about it here because the fact that officials missed a down when the 1-point game in a playoff game doesn't need to be discussed on a basketball broadcast. But at the same time, go check that out. Seeing that the Peach Belt is getting some exposure on a national scale, always good to see. Let's move on to one of our favorite teams because we're horribly biased sometimes. But, we are huge fans, as you know, of Ronnie Ball. And Ronnie Ball had a big win against Edward Waters earlier in the week, but they fell just short against Savannah State. They made the short trip to the End Market Center over in Savannah, and it was a tough night for the Sand Sharks. Dylan Lewis led them with 15. Alejandro Lott had a solid night. But other than that, they really struggled against the Tigers on Tuesday night.
They had a very bad three-point shooting game, went 5 for 23. And even shooting from the field, 22 for 59, is not great at all. But I think this is just a small hiccup in what will be a really good Sand Sharks season.
And it's worth noting, as I finally remember to put the ticker up here, that for the first time ever, the Sand Sharks received votes in the national poll. They received a few votes at 6-0 at that, or 5-0 at the time when they voted, and 6-1 now on the season. And they weren't going to run the table, and I think Ron Fadala knows that. And by the way, I didn't come up with Ronnie Ball. That is something that the Sand Sharks the social media team came up with. They call it Ronnie Ball, and I love the name because it kind of fits. It's a high-octane offense. They lead the nation in forcing turnovers. They lead the conference in assists. They're second in three-point shooting. So it's just action-packed. They're going to play tough defense. They're going to full-court press. They're going to have 10 guys in the rotation, and they're going to make you work for it. So you're going to win sometimes, but you might beat them, but you're going to be out. You're not going to outwork them. And Patrick Uriel, who's been out with an injury, they sorely missed the big 6'10" transfer. They got out rebounded 41-28 in that game. And obviously they need more of an inside presence. They're still obviously feeling the effects of losing the Peach Belt Conference Freshman of the Year, Marcus Overstreet, who was a double-double machine and he just seemed to be able to get to 25 and 10 with ease every night. And that's a tough player to replace. And so there are times when that's going to be exposed, and Tuesday night was one of those nights.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like you said, hard to replace him, but I feel like they've done a pretty successful job so far. And I want to say, rank the Sand Sharks, baby.
Well, we'll see if that loss hurts them in the polls. it hurts them getting closer. It'll be interesting to see with Aiken taking a loss if that affects them in the polls as well. But we haven't gotten a lot of love from the voters on the Peach Belt Conference. Only 2 teams ranked, and then a little bit of love for USC Buford, who's, by the way, still only in their second year. I don't even think they've completed the probationary period for Division II. So that just shows you the direction that Ron Fadala has this team going. Let's move on to the last game Tuesday night, and it was a border war, so to speak. Columbus State, not too far from Pensacola, made the trip down to West Florida and came away with a decisive 83-66 win. My pick at the beginning of the year for Player of the Year was Jared Adderton. And Jared had 29 points, 8 boards, 13 of 21 shooting. He's in the top 40 in the nation in scoring. He's second in the Peach Belt Conference. And he continues to be that dominant player.
Just truly one of the best players in Division II, in my opinion. 29-8 on really good shooting splits, and did not attempt a free throw as well, and did not pick up a foul. That's just clean ball right there.
Sounds like the referee swallowed the whistles in that one. Yeah, and sometimes I think you'd rather see that than see a game where it's over legislated. So, good job to the refs there. I don't know who would be reffing a game over in Pensacola. We haven't made it quite that far yet. But when you get a complete team effort like Columbus got, Wisdom Ubo had a great night. Rakeem Gary had a great night. Jelani James, he's one of the unsung heroes in the conference. You talk about a guy who does things that don't show up in the box score. Jelani James is definitely that guy. And when they get this kind of offensive output to put together with the great defense they play night in, night out, they're going to have dominant wins. And, they're one of the best defensive teams in the conference, just 0.2 of a point behind Clayton for second place. They're third in field goal defense. They're third in 3-point defense. So they're a team that lets the defense dictate the offense.
Oh, yeah. Defense creates offense, and that's something that this Columbus State team truly exemplifies, is defense creates offense.
And so that was Tuesday. I'm very excited. We're going to get to conference season very soon. We've got quite the slate. It's a little bit of a staggered slate, as you can see. Georgia Southwestern, who makes the short trip to Pensacola. Augusta going to Virginia Union this week. You know who went to Virginia Union, right? Two players who are very similar in their styles, actually. Ben Wallace and Charles Oakley, former Nick great Charles Oakley. I should have worn my free Oakley shirt. But, USC Buford is making a trip up to Pennsylvania, the backyard of Coach Ron Fadala. And they also have a few Yinzers on the team, a few team people from the town of Pittsburgh, and they're going to be in the area. They're going to go to Slippery Rock and then be at Indiana, Pennsylvania on Monday. Augusta will be at, I don't know. I think it's actually Chowan, but I think I might be saying that wrong. And then going into the week, Middle Georgia State, they will have a presence on this show coming up next season, as they will be joining
future
the
Peach Belt member.
As far as I know, that is slated for the 2025-26 season. Former Peach Belt team Francis Marion continued the tour of the conference. They've played Buford, they've played Flagler, and they will continue to make the tour through the conference. They played North Georgia, and this time they'll play Columbus State. The land of Fair Cow. Go ahead.
It's like catching up with your old buddies from school.
That is. It's like an old friend coming back to town to visit, and you'll have Converse. The Valkyries will take on Lander. They've matched up against a couple Peach Belt teams this year. And then Trinity Baptist, the last time we saw Trinity Baptist, they were playing UNF. So they'll be down in St. Augustine for Flagler. I'm a little disappointed that the women's team isn't making the trip, because there are a couple girls from Flagler Palm Coast High School, where I announced basketball, that are on that team. And then the week will wrap up with Livingstone making the trip to Aiken, and Southern Wesleyan headed over the Millie for Georgia College.
Just a great slate this week. Should be some competitive games. I'd say look out for that USC Buford IUP game and that Augusta Virginia Union game. Those two should be some great games.
Yeah, that Virginia Union team is a gritty, tough team, and yeah, I think when Ron Vidala gets back to his home state, I think he wants to make a statement because he's talked about that before. That he keeps receipts. He talked about that when they beat Augusta last year, and I think for Augusta, this Virginia Union team, they'll give him some trouble. But this will be the start of Augusta getting into. I don't worry about them being 1-5. I think once they get into conference play, they're going to be a formidable opponent in the conference. Which, by the way, you see the games up there. Well, once that's over, we will be in conference play. We will have two conference games. We will have conference play next Saturday, which, like I said, unusually early, but there will be some conference games, and we'll preview that. And we'll have a special guest actually next week. Joining us will be, or scheduled to appear, because we obviously haven't recorded the interview yet, is Clayton State coach Vince Alexander. And Vince Alexander has that team making a dramatic turnaround from last year. They're already more than halfway to last year's win total, even though we're only about a quarter of the way through the season. So looking forward to talking to Coach Vince Alexander. Michael, you have anything to add before we get out of here?
Not really. Just a great slate coming up, a good slate last week. And then I know you're not the biggest fan of it, but I personally love the early conference week. It really gives you a feel for what the conference is going to be like.
I think I'm just bitter about the way things have changed so much in college sports. And with college football this year, the SEC added 2 more teams. And so the Georgia Bulldogs schedule is out of whack. It's like, because I know when Georgia's playing South Carolina, I know when Georgia's playing Tennessee, I know when Georgia's playing Auburn. And for the most part this year, I had no clue what was going on. So this just feels like a little bit of residual anger at the thought that we're playing conference games at a random time. And like I said, I will reach out, and next week when we get together, I'll have an answer to why that is. But at the same time, let's get into that Peach Belt Conference season. Let's get things going.
Absolutely. This is going to be a really fun year for the conference, in my opinion.
Oh, they always are. And this year will be no different. And it's only going to get more intense as we go. And this is episode 3 of the Peach Baskets podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Peach Baskets Pod. Same thing at Instagram. We have a Facebook page that's Peach Baskets Podcast. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Join us next week with Clayton State coach Vince Alexander. From Mike Licio III, I am Mike Licio Jr. Have a great week. Until next time.
Everybody.